If you want the crown, you have to beat the champion. The test is passed, and it's 3 Grand Prix victories in a row for Kimi Antonelli.
Yes! Woo! Man, what a race! What a race, man! Woo! Oh my God!
What Kimi's doing reminds me of Lewis in 2007, even Michael Schumacher in 1991.
I'm really impressed by Kimi's mental strength.
Where he's starting to settle is as a very complete driver at a very young age.
What about the other side of the garage then?
He was convincingly defeated, and that has got to hurt.
It's the first one that he can't sort of use the book of driver excuses as to why.
Lando, I felt very cup half full.
Because he knows he should have won the race.
Franco Colapinto. Quick handshake, quick hug from Lionel Messi, and you can achieve anything, right? After such a long break, we were desperate to get back to racing. And the Miami Grand Prix was well worth the wait. Welcome everyone to F1 Nation. I'm Tom Clarkson, inside the Miami Dolphins' incredible Hard Rock Stadium, perhaps the most unique paddock on the F1 calendar. And joining me this evening on the show is F1TV expert and IndyCar race winner James Hinchcliffe and F1 correspondent Lawrence Barretto. Very warm welcome to you both. Welcome back, F1. What a race.
What a race indeed. I mean, what a weekend, right? To come off a 5-week break like that onto a sprint weekend, into a sprint weekend. So much, I think, anticipation coming into this one. First 3 races were kind of closely bunched together. New regulations, lots to learn. 5 weeks off. Teams have tons of upgrades coming. Lots of question marks and uncertainties coming into the race. Who brings the most? Who brings the best? What works? What doesn't? Evidently, weather played sort of a factor in the whole thing. From start to finish, an incredible weekend. Very exciting.
And the field closed up, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of the first big upgrade packages of the season. Obviously the team had 4 or 5 weeks to really refine these and put a bit more budget in, and I think because we only had 90 minutes of practice, it still wasn't really immediately clear what kind of impact those upgrade packages had, so we had to kind of feel our way through the race weekend. And I'm not sure we've still got the answer yet, because I don't think the teams know fully whether or not they've got the most out of those packages just yet.
I think we need to now talk about the winner, don't we? Kimi Antonelli, 3 on the bounce from 3 pole positions. He now leads the championship by 20 points. Talk us through how he did that, guys, with pressure from the reigning world champion, who was on his gearbox for lap after lap. His best win so far, would you agree?
Yeah, I would say so. I think for sure the strongest kind of all-around performance. And it's so interesting. 3 poles in a row. Still hasn't led lap 1 in any of them, but has come back to win all 3 of those races. And different circumstances kind of in each one. But the most impressive part about this one was, find a little bit of a strategy play for Mercedes to get him that track position back. But like you say, it wasn't a 14-second gap like he had in Suzuka. He didn't have the pace advantage that he had at some of those other races. This was incredible pressure from a world champion at a track that's very easy to make a mistake. That small mistake he made in China, that would have been a race-ending mistake in Miami. So you look at how composed he was, at one point complaining about something with the paddles on the steering wheel. Maybe the heart rate went up a little bit. Certainly the tone of voice went up a little bit, but he kept it calm. Lando behind, meanwhile, his radio transmissions were dead cool. I mean, that's a champion's transmission. And you kind of hear what the young driver's heart rate can do in those moments. But I think for sure that the most impressive one so far.
I'm really impressed by Kimi's mental strength, I think, after the sprint yesterday, after he had that bad start. I talked to him after qualifying, and I said, if you thought about those starts, he was like, I'm not thinking about that yet, because he wanted to put that out of his mind heading into today's Grand Prix. And I think, that start could have got in his head again, when he had that, he balked down, and I know he didn't drop back as far as he ended up doing, but I think the way that he is kind of compartmentalizing the things that Hinch just mentioned about the paddle and the issues there, and whether or not Lando was kind of pushing him or putting the pressure on, and he doesn't seem to be fazed by any of it. And I think you then compare that to his teammate George Russell, who is the more experienced of the two, and I think if you were a new fan and you came in, I don't think you'd realise the difference between their level of experience. I think the job that Kimi's doing is really impressive.
He was laughing at the pressure in the press conference after the race. He was saying, only lost 2 places at the start in the Grand Prix. That's progress. But I mean, I feel to be able to make a joke about it means he's in a really good place mentally.
Yes, 100%. But it also means that the team has a phenomenal car, because we're going to get to a point where you don't have that advantage, and losing 2 or 3 places off the start isn't okay. You're not going to be able to bounce back from that every weekend for another, 19 weekends, whatever it is. So I think it's working right now, but they're going to have to improve that at some point, because as these other teams get closer, and they did get a lot closer this weekend. Granted, there's the caveat that Mercedes hasn't brought their first proper big upgrade package. That's coming down the road. But if they continue to be this close, Kimi's not going to be able to kind of rely on the car pace advantage that they've got seemingly at the moment to make up for those bad starts.
Hinch, just with your racing drivers head on, how have you seen Kimi grow over the course of this season?
Well, I kind of mentioned it in the pre-race show that, down in Parc Fermé, when he got out of the car after qualifying, it wasn't fist pumping, cheering to the crowd. He jumped off the car, very coolly walked by the crew, threw the hang loose symbol, the swagger on the kid, the difference from that first pole and that elation of, oh my God, I'm the fastest guy at a Formula One Grand Prix. That's incredible. Now he's just like, yep, still got it. I'm here, and you just see that growth. That's very impressive. How he's handling questions about the start thing, that's very impressive. We kind of were relating it to Lando 2 years ago, 7 pole positions without leading lap 1 sort of thing, right? Oh, Lando doesn't know how to start either, right? He's dealing with a similar kind of situation and kind of in a similar way. And at some point, he's going to get it, and then we're going to stop talking about it because he'll probably never make that mistake again or never have issues off the start again. But for a kid that young, it's already been a bit of a roller coaster his first kind of year and a bit in Formula One. And where he's starting to settle is as a very complete driver at a very young age.
And he seems so assured behind the wheel now.
Yeah, I think that really tough year that he had last year had a lot of ups and downs. I remember around the Monza time, Toto Wolff, his boss, was quite tough on him and basically said he needs to sort himself out, kind of cut out the mistakes. And I think the way that he's responded to those things each time has probably just given him the confidence that he can be that assured. And do you remember, it feels like ages ago now, but George was dominant in Australia, and I really remember leaving that weekend thinking, George has got this, Kimi probably needs another year to kind of bed in. And already it just doesn't feel like that. Kimi's turned this thing around, and I think Mercedes have prepared him really well for the kind of pressure that he's going to be facing here. Do you remember? I remember when they first came in, they limited the media that he did. They media trained him as best that they could. They kind of protected him from the public eye to start with. And I think that is helping him now, because it's helping in the opposite way. When everyone is kind of getting very excited about what Kimi might deliver, he seems to be coping with that really well.
And I think a lot of that credit, honestly, goes to the architect of the whole thing in Toto Wolff, because when he first came in, admittedly, I think we can all agree that the plan was never originally to put him in the car last year, right? It was a forced hand because of Lewis's switch over to Ferrari, and Toto made that call, and they knew they sort of had to bubble wrap him a little bit. And they did. And when he made mistakes, Toto was the first one to put an arm around him and say, hey, rookies make mistakes. This is what you're here for. We know this. It's good. It's good. When the mistakes were too many, too frequent, and too costly, around Monza, he did step up a little bit, and he knew what Kimi needed to hear when he needed to hear it. When he needed the comforting arm around his shoulder, he was that guy. When he needed to be the kind of stern parental figure of the team, he spoke to him in a way that got his attention without breaking his spirit. And, now the result is he's been through not the entire range of emotions, but certainly an awful lot for just a little over a year in the series. And in the background the whole time, Toto has known what to say and when, and I think that's been really, really key in his development.
And given the pace of the car this year relative to the opposition, thank goodness they gave him that year to bed in last year, because imagine if this was his first season. It would be a huge ask on a 19-year-old.
Yeah, I think it has helped him to have that early season under his belt. He's then had another proper winter under his belt to kind of start this season on a stronger footing. But then having said that, he's such a fast learner, right? He's only, 28 races into his Formula One career now. And he's already looking like he's been around for a long time. So I think you kind of always develop, or you kind of work at the rate in which the package and the machinery that you've got. And actually think he probably would have done a reasonably good job had he had this advantage over the field. Because like Hinch was saying earlier, when you've kind of got that kind of gap to the pack, you can probably afford to make the odd mistake because you know it won't really cost you. And that's probably helped Kimi again, hasn't it, this year? Because he's got that little buffer, which obviously was much smaller here in Miami. But I think that's what makes this win so much more impressive, is that buffer had gone effectively, and he didn't really seem to be fazed by that at all.
And the really good ones are kind of ready. I mean, yes, I said thank goodness they gave him last year, and I'm sure it's helped. But actually, what Kimi's doing reminds me of Lewis in 2007, even Michael Schumacher in 1991. Remember, he gets that one-off opportunity, one race deal at Spa, and he goes and lines up 7th on the grid in a Jordan. The really good ones are ready, aren't they, actually, when they first get behind the wheel. This is a paid advertisement for BetterHelp. Life can sometimes feel a bit full on. Some days everything's great, and other days you're stressed, overwhelmed, or just not quite feeling like yourself. But when there's no actual crisis, it can be difficult to know where to turn. You might not feel like your problems are big enough. And while attitudes around seeking support have changed over the years, there's still a lot of work to be done. According to BetterHelp's 2026 State of Stigma report, nearly 70% of Brits say that societal attitudes discourage them from seeking help. But Mental Health Awareness Week, which runs from May the 11th to the 17th, is a good reminder that you don't actually have to go through things alone. Sometimes, just having someone to talk to, someone who listens and helps you make sense of what's going on in life, can make a real difference to how you're feeling. Therapy isn't just for those in crisis. It can be a steady presence in your everyday life. BetterHelp is an online therapy platform with over 30,000 qualified therapists worldwide. They help match you with a therapist who suits your needs, and if the match isn't quite right, you can switch to another therapist at any time. You don't have to be on this journey alone. Find support and have someone with you in therapy. Sign up to get 10% off at betterhelp.com/F1Nation. That's betterhelp.com/F1Nation. What about the other side of the garage then? What is George Russell thinking, after 4 races, given the relative performance between the two of them, particularly at the last 2 races in Suzuka and here in Miami?
So I think the important thing to remember is last year in Suzuka and Miami, 2 tracks that Kimi hadn't been to, he was quite quick. And the pace was strong. He was stronger than George here last year. With a year of development, I know the cars are completely different and all that sort of thing, but in a year of experience now, why wouldn't he be quicker here? Right? And we've talked about this on the show already. I've always kind of said the first 2 wins had little asterisks beside them and still had to get it done. I mean, not taking anything away from them. This is motorsport. These things happen. But this one was a much clearer of a victory, like we said, but it's at a track that we know he likes based on one data point, fine. But George has always said he doesn't like, right? So 3 wins on the trot, that is concerning for a teammate, certainly. But we know that Canada is a place that George has been very strong. The team's been very strong. George has been very strong. Yes, Kimi did a good job there last year, but George had him covered, very comfortably in the Grand Prix last year. If we go to Canada in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, whatever it is, and all of a sudden Kimi's ahead again, that's, I think, when the 63 side of the garage needs to start maybe not panicking, but really coming up with a plan, maybe changing their approach a little bit, trying to find what you have to do to not just slow him down, but speed yourself up. So it's, again, I said it before the weekend, it's not panic mode yet for George Russell, but if Canada goes Kimi's way without any extenuating circumstances, that's when you might need to start being concerned.
Is it a bit defeatist when, George was saying on Thursday during media day, I don't like this track. This isn't my track. Is that the right mindset?
I think that's a defence mechanism, to be honest. I think he was probably laying the ground to what actually transpired, which was that Kimi was going to have the advantage. I think, to Hinch's point, this was a Kimi circuit sort of last year, relative to George. And I think he was probably, having had those 2 difficult weekends in China and Japan, he probably knew what was coming. I think he was realistic about it. I think this weekend will have been tougher for George because, in China, it was mechanical reasons why he kind of got pulled out of the fight. In Japan, had he pitted 1 lap later, probably could have been fighting for the win. So I think he can probably compartmentalise those ones and think, all right, but this one, he was convincingly defeated. And that has got to hurt Hinch, right? From a racing driver perspective, you always want to beat your teammate, and he's been beaten definitively this weekend.
But like you say, it's the first one that he can't sort of use the book of driver excuses as to why. So it's the first one. It's not a trend yet. But what Kimi's doing now, and I was really kind of hoping we had a race that was interrupted by rain, if I'm totally honest, because dealing with those conditions and getting thrown that curveball, that wrench in the plan, it would have been really interesting to see how a driver with Kimi's level of experience reacted and coped with that compared to how Max or Lando or George would have dealt with it.
And I asked George about that, whether or not he was starting to get a bit worried in the TV pen, whether he's starting to get worried about these running results, and he immediately was going, I can't wait to get back to some more conventional tracks. So I think he still fundamentally believes, when we get back to Europe and we get to your Monacos and your Spains and your Austrias and Silverstones, I still think he believes that he will be able to pull it back. And 20 points is actually not that much, is it? A difference, and that can change within a couple of race weekends. So I don't think he is, to Hinch's point, panicking yet, but I do think that this one is going to hurt a lot, and he's got to win in Canada. That is a George track, so if he doesn't win there, then maybe we can have this chat about whether he needs to worry.
He doesn't want four-wheel sliding, as he called it here, right? Hinch, just what is four-wheel sliding? I mean, four-wheel drift? Or?
Yeah, essentially. When you come off a corner, right, and you're talking about corner balance or car balance, rather, if you're understeering, the front's not quite turning, but the back's got enough grip. If you're oversteering, the rear's sliding and kind of trying to pass the front of the car. A four-wheel slide is just that. Neither the front nor the back of the car are really gripped up. So you're not fighting an imbalance. You're just fighting a lack of grip. And it requires you to sort of almost anticipate what the car is going to do, in the mid-corner phase to the exit. It is challenging, and certain drivers kind of like those lower grip conditions. We did this comparison from Oscar and Lando a bunch in the last third of the season last year when we went to these low grip circuits. It really suits Lando. Oscar struggles a bit more. We got back to those higher grip tracks like Qatar late in the year, and Piastri had the advantage again. So George brings up a good point. We know that Kimi's good at Suzuka. We know he's good at Miami. We know George is good in Montreal. So let's see what happens when we get to Canada.
A lot
right? Does, I think.
As Lawrence was saying, it's kind of a must win.
It's a must beat Kimi. It's not a must win. They got a really good shot at winning, obviously, but if someone else wins, as long as it's not Kimi, he's got to beat his teammate.
Now, talking about gotta beats, shall we talk about McLaren now? Lando, I felt very cup half full after that race. I think McLaren should be celebrating what's been a huge turnaround, and yet Lando was very much, that's the one that got away.
Because he knows he should have won the race, I think, and that's what's frustrating. I think in the TV pen, he said, I can get over the P2s and the P3s when I couldn't have had the chance to win. But I think, had they not got undercut by Mercedes and Kimi, he would have won this Grand Prix, and then he would have kind of left this weekend thinking, hang on, maybe we really are back in the fight, whether or not that truly is the case. Obviously, Mercedes is going to bring their upgrade package to the next race in Canada. But I think that he really felt like he should and could have won today's Grand Prix. So I think that's probably why he was glass half empty.
He actually said in the press conference, I think I had a faster car.
And what's so important about that is, to Lawrence's point, come Canada, they might not, right? This was a huge opportunity for McLaren to try to collect as many points when they had maybe a little bit, and it's a small advantage if it is one, over Mercedes, and they didn't execute. And so I think that's what's tough. Racers, right? Whether you're a driver, a team manager, engineer, whatever, memories are very short when it comes to successes, right? So you look at where they were on Friday and Saturday, and it was fist pumping, hands in the air. Look at how far we've come. 24 hours later, we threw that one away, didn't we? And they're already forgetting the victory on Saturday because the taste of defeat is so much more bitter than how sweet the taste of victory is sometimes. These drivers hate losing more than they like winning. And this was an example of a race lost. At the very least, make Kimi do it on the track, right? Let's not have it be a strategy, misstep from McLaren. But you say misstep, we were all thinking it was going to rain. We had to move the race up because we thought it was going to rain. We are now at the end of what the Grand Prix should have been almost, and there is not a drop of rain out there. So So you can forgive McLaren for how many radio transmissions did we see? Rain in 5 laps, rain in 10 laps, rain in turns 7 and 8. There was no rain. They were trying to just wait for the rain to come so they didn't pit and then have to pit 3 laps later for inters or full wets or whatever. So I understand how it happened, but I think Max almost tipped the hand a little bit because he was so quick when he did that early stop under the safety car and came back out. And it was a risk for Mercedes to pit him when he did. If it had rained, they'd have been laughing. They being McLaren. So it's not as straight up a blunder as say Qatar last year, but it's still they're going to feel like they let one get away.
Tell us about the upgrade package, Lawrence, in terms of what they brought and how much encouragement. I'm still trying to see this as a positive race for McLaren in terms of where they were 5 weeks ago in Japan versus where they are now. They've got more coming in Montreal.
Oh, I think, when they're in the debrief or first thing tomorrow morning, they're going to be delighted with how this weekend went because you're right, Tom. They've stepped it up from that first race in Australia, didn't even start with either car at the next race in China in that Grand Prix, to then come back in round 4 and be fighting a team that we thought were going to run away with this championship is extraordinary. Now, we shouldn't be surprised because every package that McLaren have brought since 2023 has delivered big steps of performance. It's delivered what they thought. And so I think that we shouldn't have been surprised that they were able to do this. I think what is particularly encouraging for them is, ahead of this weekend, Andrea Stella said, we're going to give the drivers a completely new car. Half's coming here. So it's still a dramatic upgrade package. Changes all over from the bodywork to the front to the rear end. But the second half is coming in Canada, and to the point where you're going to get a B-spec car in Montreal. So I think actually McLaren are in a very strong position. And I think while they might be wary of what Mercedes bring when they come to Montreal, they felt like they should have won this race because they want to get on with it. And they want to be defending both of their constructors and drivers championships, because I think this season is going to be quite topsy-turvy. It's really going to depend on when you bring an upgrade package, how quickly you're able to get the most out of it. And so I think it's going to be significantly closer for them than it was last year. So every result, every point is going to count. And I imagine that's why in that moment it hurt. But actually what they've delivered here, for me, pulls them back into the championship fight. And should probably worry everyone else because there's going to be probably 1, maybe 2 more big upgrade packages of this quality this year. And if they keep doing that, then they are going to be the best team.
Championship fight. I'm just looking at my points totals. Norris is 51, Antonelli's on 100. So the gap is decent already, isn't it?
Already, but then we saw last year how quickly Max Verstappen hauled himself back into the title fight, how Lando Norris overhauled Oscar Piastri. I did a Q&A with Zach ahead of the weekend, and just before we went on stage, I just asked him, we were just chatting, I was like, do you think you can fight for both championships? And he was like, yeah, I definitely think we can. And Zach doesn't tend to do that, I don't think, when you're just having a chat with him, unless he genuinely believes that they can get in the fight. And I think that belief echoes right through McLaren at the minute. And I think when you've got that, it's an incredible strength of yours to be able to have to come to a track, because it's going to scare everyone else. Because every time you tell them they're bringing a big upgrade package, you've already won slightly, because everyone else is like, uh-oh. So yeah, I think it is a gap. Of course it is. But I think we've really seen so far in McLaren's dominant period that they can turn things around, and I think they can just once more.
Look, we discussed the intra-team battle at Mercedes between Antonelli and Russell. What about what we've seen from Norris and Piastri here? I felt at the opening 3 races, Oscar had the upper hand when he actually raced. But in terms of lap time, I felt he had the upper hand, whereas here it was very much Norris, wasn't it?
Again, a Norris track, never been out-qualified by a teammate in the Grand Prix here, so kind of status quo in a sense. Obviously, first win here, sprint win last year. I think in the first few rounds, there were a few weekends where Norris had more troubles, reliability issues in practice, so didn't get as many laps. And obviously, with the rule set still being in its infancy, drivers still kind of figuring that stuff out. I'm not sure we have enough true data points to have a really good sense on kind of if there's a hierarchy between the two of them at McLaren right now. I think both have had strong weekends. Both have had weekends where they seem to bit on the back foot. But again, we're still so early in this season, so it's tough to know.
What about Ferrari? They came here with more upgrades than any other team, and I'm no body language expert, but I felt after the sprint that Charles Leclerc was frustrated in that we've come here with more than anyone else, and there was Max Verstappen doing, great things in terms of pace. Where are we at in terms of the job Ferrari's done here in Miami?
Fred didn't do his media session, his traditional media session after the race because travel plans changed. So we didn't kind of get the chance to grill him. But I think that what was generally felt within the team this weekend is they've added performance, but they've not added anywhere near as much performance as I think they thought they would. Qualifying was a key area that they wanted to work on. So, the 1 lap pace. And I think Charles probably realised very early on that, while the car did feel better, they just hadn't shut the gap in that metric. And I think that will be a concern because it will almost certainly have been a big part of their cost cap development budget that they would have spent on this package. So I think it is worrying. I think they'll be more worried when they saw what Red Bull brought and how much of a step they were able to make. Obviously, how much of a step, like we talked about, the McLaren have made. So I think they will be concerning. Equally, though, Ferrari have had a habit in the last couple of years of bringing parts and they don't work. So I think that they probably shouldn't be too hard on themselves because Charles probably should have had a podium again today. That would have made him 3 out of 4 podiums. So I guess it's all relative to like how well or how bad it's been. But I actually still think Ferrari are in a good spot. It's just this upgrade package just hasn't delivered, or they just haven't found how to get the most out of it because they've only had 90 minutes of practice. And it might just be that they bought too much stuff and they then don't know. Because I was talking to one technical director actually this ahead of the weekend, and he was like, what if we bring all these bits and it's one bit that doesn't work? It's going to take us ages to work out like which bit is the
ramifications of that, right?
Exactly. So I think actually let's just let it play out a little bit longer. Annoyingly, Canada's a sprint weekend, so they're not going to get much more time to test it there than it's Monaco. So it might be that we're going to have to wait till Barcelona and Austria to actually see the full kind of complement of performance that comes with those kind of packages. So I don't think they'll be panicking yet, but I think they'll be disappointed, obviously, that they didn't make the kind of step
Lawrence,
that Red Bull and
you mentioned
McLaren
Monaco.
did.
You mentioned Monaco. Just do you think they've found enough over 1 lap for Charles to make the difference in qualifying at Monaco?
I don't think there's enough evidence yet to confirm that. But then if you'd asked me right at the start of the season, when is Lewis's or Charles' best chance of winning a race, I would have said Monaco, just because I think the confidence that they had in that early phase of the season was quite strong in the car, and obviously you need confidence in Monaco, but I'm not sure I've seen enough yet to confirm that yet.
Hinch, what did you make of Charles' spin at the end?
Frustration, I think, more than anything. Late in a tire life, slightly offline, and it's, I don't want to say it's easy to do, but it's easier than you probably think to do. Just having that battle, trying to hang on to that final podium spot, right? And I think it was just a really small error in judgment, but it led to pretty big consequences, tapping the wall, damaging the left front, and then falling down the order. And that's, I think, more than anything. You had the damage to Lewis's car early on in the race from, I think it was contact with Colapinto, because we caught Fred on F1TV after the race, and he said that just essentially ended Lewis's race from a performance standpoint. Just did so much damage to the floor and the barge boards. And then, just a missed opportunity with Charles. So tough weekend for them. It's some promise, certainly, but tough result.
You say missed opportunity. How much do you think missed from a P3 point of view? Or when you think of the electric, amazing start he made and was, P1 at the exit of turn 1, missed opportunity in that was a race they shoulda, coulda, woulda won?
I just don't think they had the same, performance level of either McLaren or Mercedes. So yeah, I bet on Charles leading out of turn 1. I'm gonna take those small wins. It's not often our predictions are right on.
True,
on
that is very true.
We struggle with that, but no, I don't. I think they were doing the best. I think they were actually maximizing their package, right? I think they were maximizing what they had on the day. Whether they maximize the potential of the car over the weekend, it's tough to know, because you bring up a great point, man. This is like the number one rule of engineering is make one change at a time so you can isolate what's actually better and worse. They don't have that freedom with no testing in a single practice session. You're bolting on 11, 12 different new components, and it really makes the job for the engineers difficult. It really makes the job for the drivers difficult to isolate what's helping, what's hurting, what's changing, this, that, or the other. And all of these things, they work together together. Nothing's working in isolation on a Formula One car. So it's massively challenging to bring such a large list of upgrades. So whether or not they maximize the potential of the car over the weekend, maybe not. I think they were doing a great job of maximizing the car they had for the race until the spin at the end.
Hinch, it's such an interesting point. I don't know whether McLaren only bought half of their upgrade here from a production workflow point of view, or did they bring only half because they wanted to see what was working before they then bring the other half in Montreal? Maybe a different philosophy there.
It's one of those sneaky things that you could see, masterminded by an Andrea Stella. He's one of those guys that would we could have had all this done. We could delay these few parts, actually give ourselves another couple days to develop them. And every engineer will tell you every extra day that you can develop it before you create it, before you produce it, could find a little bit more performance. And then the knock-on effect is, we can do a little bit better job of isolating what's really performing well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Look, what about Lewis Hamilton? I felt this was the weekend, his quietest weekend. He was so bullish after the opening 3 races. Even Suzuka, which didn't go quite so well, but so bullish. Yet here, okay, I know he had the damage, but still, least happy race for Lewis Hamilton. Why?
Yeah, I think at the start of the Japanese Grand Prix weekend, he said he kind of felt like he had his mojo back. Then obviously that race weekend didn't quite pan out. And then I feel like it's carried through into this race, and that the deficit clearly to Charles was there essentially throughout the whole weekend, which won't be easy to take. I think he hasn't clearly felt comfortable with the car at any point this weekend. And we've seen a trend with Lewis at Ferrari that when he doesn't start off the weekend strongly, he finds it quite hard to catch back up. He said actually yesterday that they've moved to a place where it was closer to what Charles had at the beginning, and he wished he'd done that early doors. So I guess that's a little bit of an admission that they just had a bit of a misstep at the start of the weekend. And on a sprint weekend, it's really hard, not just Lewis, it's hard for any driver really to catch those kind of missteps up, over the course of the weekend. I still think it's way too early to worry about Lewis. I still feel like the Lewis who's happy with this year's Ferrari still exists. But I think, again, it's race 4 where it hasn't quite gone to plan for him. And I think he would have hoped that he would have made a bit more progress, been a bit more competitive relative to Charles, because so far we've talked about, teammate versus teammate. This is probably what his greatest irritation is that he hasn't been able to compete, to push Charles effectively, consistently throughout the race weekend.
You know how we were saying Montreal is a key weekend for George Russell. He just needs to come home ahead of Kimi. I feel Montreal for Lewis is a big one, right? He's owned that place for his entire career, actually. If Charles is ahead again there, then that's going to be a source of frustration for him.
Yeah, I think that's probably not a terrible assessment. I mean, if you even look to last year, through China, he was doing not bad, right? And it kind of started going south here, to be honest. This wasn't a great race for him last year either. And I do believe that the way these cars are, being lighter and a little more nimble, even with less downforce, that's still just fundamentally, I think, suits. It's more towards his style than the ground effects cars were. But yeah, is he comfortable enough to be challenging somebody as quick as Leclerc week in and week out, on a consistent basis? I'm with Lawrence. I don't think we know yet, but the next couple races will be interesting because he had a strong start last year too, even with all everything that was new. It's going to be telling, I think, the next few rounds.
This episode is sponsored by Shopify. Starting something new always comes with a few question marks, doesn't it? Whether it's launching a business or beginning a new project, there's always that moment where you think, what if this doesn't work? But all you really need is the right tools to help you get started, and that tool is Shopify. Shopify gives you everything you need to get going in one place, from building your online store with ready-made templates to Shopify's built-in AI tools that help you write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your images. And it can help your marketing too, thanks to email and social media tools designed to get the word out about your brand and help you find customers. It's basically like having your own commerce expert at your fingertips, with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. It's time to turn those what-ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/nation. Go to shopify.com/nation. That's shopify.com/nation. couple more stories before we go, guys. Can we start with Red Bull? We touched on them already. Think Max Verstappen couldn't even get into Q3 last time out at Suzuka. I know this is a very different racetrack, but qualifies P2 for the Grand Prix. What a turnaround. In fact, the biggest turnaround of all the teams this weekend. Were we surprised? Probably not, because they're Red Bull.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I was surprised, but I think I was impressed at the level of step that they were able to make around here. I know they tested at filming day the new upgrade package, and almost immediately from the first lap that Max got in it, he realised, I'm not a passenger anymore, I'm back in control of this car. So he would have come here with a lot of confidence, probably would have allowed him to maybe be a bit more aggressive in the way that he started the weekend. And I think it's interesting that as he's made the progress through the weekend, his teammate Isaac Hadjar, who's had a really strong season, kind of went the other way for various reasons that many of them went within his control because they were mechanical. But I think that the way that Max has been able to have the confidence in the car again and be much happier in the way that he's talking about things just shows the step that they made. And let's not forget, they spent too much money last year keeping him in the championship to fight until the last race, knowing that would have an impact on this year. We are only in race 4, obviously would have been race 6 without the 2 races not happening. And they've still been able to bring this massive package. So they've started this year with an underdeveloped car that wasn't quite what they wanted, didn't really do what they wanted. And they've already brought a significant package to the car that has not only put Max out of the midfield, Red Bull out of the midfield, but actually it's hauled him specifically back into the fight for pole position again and for race wins. And I think Max probably only just needs that little feeling of it's possible, like anything is possible, for him to go and make it impossible for anyone else to do that. So I think it's a really encouraging step that they've made here. But I don't think we should be surprised, because Red Bull have done this all the time. Last time there was a big reg change, Ferrari started off the year well and Red Bull ended it and won that year. So
yeah, it's a great point. I mean, it's a team that certainly knows how to develop a race car. The point for me that I thought was really interesting that Max touched on was, fine, a lot of performance was added to the car. That's what the upgrades are traditionally for. But there was also a change to the steering system. There was something in that car from, he said, the first lap he did at Barcelona in the steering that was giving him the wrong feeling. And if a driver's not connected to the car, it's not giving you the feedback that you need, you're never going to be able to get the best out of yourself. And he said one of the big changes was less about pure performance and more about giving him that feel that he needs through the front end, through the steering, and then he can go attack the performance that they've added, to the car. And if you notice, by far the biggest gap he's had to Hadjar all weekend long. There was not one competitive session where it really seemed like they were on the same page. You kind of notice that, in fact, throughout most of the top teams. Norris and Piastri are probably the closest, but Charles and Lewis a bit bigger than what we've seen. Antonelli over Russell a bit bigger than we've seen, and then Verstappen over Hadjar was pretty monumental, pretty seismic in terms of the gap. And Hadjar was saying, don't know why, I didn't forget how to drive. I'm not sure where this is coming from. Again, it's one race. It's no reason to panic if you're on his side of the garage, but it is interesting that once you get Max comfortable in the car, he is going to find every ounce of performance out of it.
And do you think the changes to the steering were made specifically to his car, or do you think they had to be made to both cars?
I'm sure it was an option. It's like that the front suspension change that McLaren had 2 years ago, right? Lando wanted it. There was something in the front end that he didn't like. They made an adjustment. Oscar tried it. He's like, I don't prefer it. I went back to the old one. So they were on different specs, but it was a driver preference thing. So I'm sure that Hadjar's been offered whatever it was to change. I don't know, again, if it was a performance thing or if he had the same complaints that Max did about feel. But it doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, it's Max is going out and getting the job done with the car. So, Hadjar's just got to figure out what it is that Max is able to do.
What did you make of the spin on lap 1?
Oh, it's like classic Max, isn't it? He did that in Hungary, I remember, a few years ago, and he caught it. And he just seems to be able to control something or catch something on the edge of disaster and just pull it back. And I'm not sure there's anyone else in the field who could probably do that kind of thing. And he didn't even lose that many places, did he? And was still able to make up so much progress even on those tyres, which would have been pretty worse for wear.
Now, guys, Franco Colapinto. I think a lesson we've learned this weekend is that quick handshake, quick hug from Lionel Messi, and you can achieve anything, right? I mean, the guy's been on fire all weekend. In fact, and a show run in front of 600,000 people last weekend as well. He's a very emotional driver who just is loving the love, I feel, right now, and doing a great job on track.
I think he's going to have to do a show run before every Grand Prix now going forward, because...
is that part of the cost cap, or how's that one? That's going to be real expensive for Alpine.
Cap, so
no more developments, but Colapinto's going to do 18 more show runs.
I think the interesting thing with Franco, for me, is that there have been flashes across the whole time he's been at Alpine of actually maybe there is some pace there. He just hasn't been able to pull it together, whereas obviously this weekend... he's had the edge over Pierre, and Pierre was saying that there's something wrong with the car that he doesn't feel quite comfortable in. But Franco has had the edge over him the whole weekend, and he's converted. So he's had a strong quali, and he's converted it in the Grand Prix and continued that advantage over Pierre. So I think fair play to him. He really needed that, because I think Pierre's had an outstanding start to the season. And I think it was important for Franco, if he's got any hopes of staying at the team beyond the end of this year, starting to make a bit of an inroad into that gap to him and Pierre, and that he's not just a driver who's there because he's got Argentinian backing, or he's got this huge following back in Argentina that are supporting him. So I think it was a massive weekend for him, and now he's just got to carry it forward, right? And what really helps him is that Alpine are the 5th fastest team at the minute. I remember in pre-season, I'm pretty sure we all put Alpine around best of the rest, and then we went to Australia and they were basically nowhere, and they were struggling with understeering the high-speed corners. But they've really, really upped their game. They've learnt quickly. It's really paying them back that they switched all of their development money onto this year's car really early doors last year into this year. And I think that if both Pierre and Franco are able to get the most out of it, I think Alpine are on a really strong spot now to be kind of P5 in the constructors come the end of the year.
It's almost the same story of Haas from last year, where they had pivoted early the year before, got to Australia, car was abysmal. I think they were locked out the last row, made a couple of changes, points in China. You know, it can turn that quickly. But no, they've done a remarkable job. And when you look at how quick Pierre's been consistently over the start of the season, for Franco to have a weekend where really every session on track, he was the car to beat, it's a huge jump for him. We just need to see him doing it consistently and not once every 5 races. He needs to be kind of pushing Pierre and having them go a little more tete-a-tete a little more often.
I know you said, Lawrence, there were moments of encouragement at Alpine, but I feel this weekend is the first time we've seen Franco as he was at Williams. Do you remember there were some giant killing performances in that second half of 24, and this is the closest I feel we've seen of him getting back to that level.
Oh, you're right. Like, it's miles better than anything he's done as a weekend whole since he's come back to Alpine. I think he really had to fight to keep his seat for this year. And if I'm honest, in the early phase of this year, I was a bit worried for him because the gap to Pierre was quite significant, even though I think talking to him separately, he felt like he was doing a good job. It just wasn't coming to fruition. So I think that he's been able to pull it together for this race. You're right, it's significant. But even during his time at Williams, it was flashes, wasn't it? He had that strong weekend in Baku. There was one slightly later on in the year, maybe it was Austin. But it wasn't consistent through that period. So I think, to Hinch's point, that's what he's got to do now consistently. And he's fortunate in that the car is putting him in a position where he should be able to fight for points regularly if he maxes it. Whereas obviously last year, the car was nowhere. So even if he had a good weekend, it was much harder to show if he had a good weekend.
Final discussion point. Who had double points finish for Williams on their bingo card?
I mean, anyone who said they did are lying, because there is no... I'm pretty sure Williams definitely didn't think that they were going to do it, right? Yeah, outstanding from them, really. I think they've got a lot of low-hanging fruit in that they just needed to shave weight off because the car was, almost 20 kilos overweight coming into this season for the various reasons we've talked about, the production delays. So I think for them to get both cars in was strong. I think they showed that last year, operationally, they were very strong. So actually in a race which offered opportunity like this one did, they were there to capitalise on it again. I think Carlos and Alex clearly feel much more comfortable with the machine that they've got. There's the irritation that they were expecting to not just be P5, but taking the fight to the teams in front, and they're obviously not doing that. So this is actually still small fry for them in terms of what their pre-season expectations were. But I think it will probably be a massive relief to everyone within that team at the factory and trackside that they have brought this upgrade package here. and it has delivered the kind of step that they had done. They have got more coming in Canada. They've also got more coming in Monaco as well.
I think kind of every race James Vowles implied the other day, didn't he?
Yeah, and I think that just means that they're probably, 3 or 4 months behind everyone else, so they're just slightly offset. So it might be that they will be coming back into this fight for best of the rest, and then maybe they'll be able to start making a gap in. But it was important for them to have done that because the production delays really hurt them. It was embarrassing for them, and you could tell that Carlos and Alex were annoyed with the car that they had, and rightly so. The team were annoyed, with the way it's turned out. So I think for them to bounce back again only in race 4 with this kind of upgrade package in a very competitive midfield as well. We just talked about Alpine making a step, Haas have looked strong. For them to have this weekend and get both cars in, it's quite difficult, isn't it, these days, to get, and for a midfield team to get 2 cars in. So they've taken advantage of it really well.
They have, certainly. Was some attrition in this race in front of them. From cars that they're racing against, Hulkenberg, Lawson, Gasly, obviously. So I think for them, when you look at their performance, like the improvement from a pure performance standpoint, getting both cars into Q2, that's the win. That's the on paper, that's the hard work back at the factory. That's doing a good job upgrading the car. Getting both cars into the points in the race, that is capitalizing on an opportunity, executing well in the race, drivers making smart decisions, and all the rest of it. But it's not like they're leaving here being like, we're now the 5th fastest team. We're 9th and 10th on merit. You're going to take the points. You have to capitalize on those opportunities when they present themselves when you're racing in the midfield. But I think they'll look back at what their pure pace was. It is a step forward. It's that little bit of progress. They're going to need those little upgrades every single week to kind of keep chipping away at it.
And if we see a late season charge, as Lawrence was suggesting, the 5 points that they've grabbed in these opening 4 races could be crucial.
Exactly that. And I think that's probably why they will be most satisfied, that on a weekend where, like Hinch said, there was so much opportunity, they've nailed it with both cars as well. On a weekend where, Racing Bulls were off the pace, Haas haven't delivered, even though they knew the circuit wasn't going to be strong. Alpine couldn't get both cars into the top 10. So I think they'll take a lot of confidence from that, and the knowledge that more bits are coming, and there's a lot of more cheap weights, a cheap lap time that they can shave off the car. So I think for them, there's a lot of optimism, I think, within the team going forward. But I still think they're probably, 8th, 9th best team, probably on pure performance. So there's still a long way to go. But they weren't even racing in the midfield, really, at the start of the year. So that is a step forward, isn't it?
All right. Well, guys, thank you both very much for your time. Driver of the day?
Got to give it to Kimi, don't you? I mean, only lost 2 places at the start. Avoided a turn 2 spin by Max. Kept his head about him when he lost the lead on the racetrack. Did the outlap he needed, kept the gap close, did the outlap he needed in the pit cycle to get ahead of Lando, and then put up with some pressure under some difficult circumstances. So yeah, I think it's got to be him.
I didn't want to agree, because in case that we all end up saying Kimi, because it's quite difficult. But I think at one point I thought Charles was having a good race, and then obviously the spins pulled him out of that. And then Max, the way that he fought back after that spin, I thought was really strong. But I think, to Hinch's point, I think the quality of the drive that Kimi delivered here, under pressure from the reigning world champion, dealing with those potential technical issues that he had, and knowing that actually a big result to George was important, trying to gap him as much as he could on a track where he had an advantage, and still making sure that he came out on top, was really impressive. So I'm going to give it to him.
It's going to be Kimi from all 3 of us, because it was a huge moment for him.
Yeah, it's honorable mention to Max for sure. But
51 laps on the hard tyre was incredible. Was decent.
And that, decent shit. Hey, just getting to watch him scythe his way through the field is just so much fun. It was just kind of like old school Max, So yeah, honorable mention there. But for sure, I think Kimi takes it.
Now, we finish the show with the very sad news we received here in Miami that former F1 driver and Paralympian Alex Zanardi has passed away at the age of 59. Alex raced for Jordan Minardi, Lotus and Williams in the 90s, and he also won 2 IndyCar titles. In 2001, he suffered a major crash at an IndyCar race at the Lausitz Ring in Germany. He had to have both legs amputated, and that didn't stop him achieving more sporting greatness. He went on to win 4 gold medals and 2 silvers for Italy in hand cycling at the Paralympic Games. He was an inspiration. I'd just love to get memories and thoughts from each of you about the great Alex Zanardi.
I mean, for me, Alex's IndyCar career was one that was well timed for me as a young kid, go-karting and aspiring to be an IndyCar driver one day, because his style was so flamboyant on the racetrack. He was spectacular to watch. And that sort of late 90s era, driving for Chip Ganassi Racing in IndyCar, where he got those 2 titles, some of the performances that he put on there were, I mean, spellbinding. Races we still talk about and still reference on broadcast today. And on top of that, outside of the car, he was just this energetic, charismatic, just loving life kind of character. And what was so impressive was after, what happened to him in Germany, he didn't lose any of that. The zest for life was there. The passion for competition was obviously still there. And watching what he overcame to not only get back into a race car and be successful back in touring cars, to then, of course, pivot to his career as a Paralympian was, I mean, it's the stuff of legend. It's if you haven't read his book, I highly recommend it, because it's a hell of a read. Because he was a hell of a guy, incredible driver, incredible athlete and competitor, but again, just an incredible, gracious, humble, just beautiful human being. And my heart hurts for his family, because we lost a good one.
And that second chapter is kind of when I got to know him a little bit more, because early in my career I was covering world touring cars, and then I covered the Paralympics, obviously, and when he went on to achieve those incredible things, 6 Olympic medals, 4 of them gold. For me, he was just an incredible human. I just think that every time you talk to him, he was just happy to chat to you. Like he wanted to help you, he wanted to offer you advice. He was just living his best life, and you had no idea really the trauma that he had gone through. And I think that there are so few people I probably will ever meet that will ever be able to match that kind of strength, bravery and charisma and passion for life. So I'm sad I never got to see him race in Formula One and Indy, but very fortunate to have seen what he was able to achieve.
How about you, TC? Any good Zanardi stories from his years?
I remember introducing him to my wife, Bella, and I said, "Alex, this is my wife, Bella." "I know she's Bella. What's her name?"
Like I said, charismatic,
charming guy. And wasn't it sort of fun to see Brian Herter here, because I just think of the move at the corkscrew. Was it 1996 when Alex sort of wrestled his way past Brian, and to see Brian here supporting Colton in Formula 2, the weekend that Alex passes away. But I found him such an inspirational figure, and it was a great sadness to me that I never saw him race in person in IndyCar. I remember vividly him in the Williams in 99, which just never quite worked out, because on paper it should have done. The bond between him and Patrick Hedge should have worked, because Alex was so passionate about the technical side of the sport. But it was early days with the groove tyres, the narrow track cars, and it just didn't work. So I'm sad that second phase of Formula One didn't work out for him, but just an inspirational man and much loved by everyone he ever met. And it was a huge privilege for me to sit down and do a Beyond the Grid podcast with him back in 2020. Just to be in his company and to hear him talk about such a remarkable life was wonderful. And a link to that episode is in the description for this podcast, or you can scroll back down the Beyond the Grid feed as well if you want to have a listen back. But Alex Zanardi, what a legend. And the thoughts of everyone in Formula One are with Alex's family and friends right now. Thanks very much to Hinch and Lawrence. I'll be back next Monday, so speak to you then. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.